also to be able to work on their terms in another location that works for them. It might be home, it might be a local coffee shop, it might be the inside of their car, it could be their garage, who knows? But they have the ability to be functional and contributory towards a work environment while they are not physically located in a central location with their other coworkers. Now, you might be asking yourself, why does this matter? And honestly, the reason that it matters is that one thing that keeps an employee connected to their employer is when they like to go to work. And when you are going to a work location that's convenient for you, that fits your life, it suits your circumstances, it is a lot less likely that you will look for other employment because you're content. And a part of making your workplace a content location for you is to identify what's important to the people that are working for you. So I've worked with many businesses, and one of the things that we identified over the last 18 months as a result of COVID is that for some people, that flexibility of working from home was the most important thing, primarily because so many of them had to monitor their children's education situations because they were having class in the kitchen, for example, and they needed to have a parent there to help them through that. But we also found that there were some people who needed to be able to go to another location so that they could shelter in place with a family member that might be in another state or another country. And the employer needed to figure out, what do I have to do to make it possible so that my worker has the flexibility to do their work in the way that they need to do their work? Is it about technology? Because that's a really important consideration. As you may have heard in the news, there were many students who were impacted by the fact that they didn't have good enough computers or have computers at all in their homes so that they could connect to the school systems where they were able to access their teachers. Employers need to think about having the right types of technology, making sure that there's sufficient memory in the technology so that all of the applications that are necessary to do their work and to connect to the internet, as well as programs like Zoom and Google Meets and other virtual meeting locations and settings, that there's enough technology to support the employee that needs to do that. You also have to ask the question of how good is the Wi-Fi in your area that you're looking to work from? Because a lot of people I know may want to be able to work from home, but they're in a remote location and their Wi-Fi is spotty. And so employers needed to look at getting resources for their workers, hotspots that are portable. I am sure that many cell phone companies will look back on this period of 2020 to 2021 very happily, because there was so much demand for technology that hadn't existed previously. It actually provided an opportunity for those entities to sell more, and now they've created this connection with customers, and I'm telling you, employees don't want to give up that connection. So you as an employer need to be thinking about that. Your employees may have worked remotely because it was helpful and necessary as a result of COVID, but don't make the assumption that they want that to continue to be the case. I worked with one business owner who actually closed down his office because he thought, hey, I'll save myself the overhead of having that space available so that my workers can come there. And he actually had a few employees who said, well, where am I going to go when I need to get out of my house, when I don't have the quiet that I need, or I don't have the technology that I need, like the printer access and things like that? Those are all factors that you need to be looking at from an employer perspective, because this idea of hybrid is exactly that. It's not eliminating one or the other. It's making it possible so that they can all coexist in a way that supports your organizational goals, supports the needs of your workers, and supports the expectations of your customers. So I encourage you to be looking at your businesses specifically for how it would be possible for you to insert some virtuality. Is there any way that you can have work done for you that doesn't demand that your employee go to a particular location? Is there project work that you can give them that they can do on their own time in their own way? Have you asked your workers, is that something that they want? Those are the types of questions that you should be asking yourself as an employer, and you should be connecting with your workers to find out if hybrid really is something that they want to continue doing. Do you have any questions or comments before I move on to the next trend? I will interpret that silence to mean no. But remember, if a question comes to you, just unmute and ask it. So let's talk about data. I know that everyone, when I say that, sometimes there are people that will get a little bit of heart palpitation because they're thinking data, they're thinking metrics, they're thinking numbers, they may even be thinking about math, and there might be a little bit of agitation associated with that. But I'm here to tell you, even though that's the way that we look at data, data is really important. I mean, for example, how did employers know that their workers were doing well once they started working from home? They had to look at the output of their work product. They had to have some way to measure what was actually getting completed and to compare it to what got completed before. And this idea of using data in a way that's powerful for you operationally is not new. It's just that we are finding more and more ways as business owners to rely on that information to make things easier for us, to make things cost less for us, and to set ourselves some targets that we can work towards, because now we can measure where we are so that we have an idea about where we want to get to. So when I talk about data, it could mean anything for your business. Let's say that you produce cookies. Are you able to produce the number of cookies that are necessary so that every customer that wants a cookie in a week has the ability to do that? I've talked to business owners who have the attitude, I make a batch of cookies, I go out to the local market and I sell them, and when I run out, I'm finished. Now, that's a reality, and that is sometimes very, very necessary. But there's another way that you can approach that. When you have found yourself in a situation that you've run out of those cookies, you can count how many people ask for your cookie between the time that you've run out and when that market closes. It's going to be a little bit taxing to sit there and keep telling people that you don't have any product, but what it's going to do is give you an idea about the demand for your product. Now, there are a lot of variables involved, because on a nice day, you may have more people that want your cookie than on a rainy day. But the bottom line is, if you are finishing your product available to be sold before all of the customers that are going to buy those products have come by, that's something that you want to look at. That's a pertinent piece of data for that particular entrepreneur, if that's their business circumstance. And you can find that kind of information that you can use to your advantage in any business. I know a client that right now does massage work, and they are trying to introduce classes to help people with meditation and personal stress management. And they asked their massage therapist to ask their customers, as they were giving them their services, how would you feel about this? Is this something that you'd be interested in doing? If you're interested in doing it, what particularly makes you want to do it? Is it because you've got some challenges with dealing with stressful work situations, or maybe you've got a life circumstance that's really, really pernicious? Identifying what drove the customers to be interested in that kind of meditation availability was something that my client had her massage therapist ask, so that they could collect that information, and then they could make decisions about how much energy, time, and money they invested in this potential new line of business. For you and your business, it is really important that you know what your data points are. And different businesses have different data points. If you're a cleaning service, it may be how many contracts do you have to clean? It might also be how quickly can you clean the spaces that you're cleaning? How efficiently can you do it? Can you use one bottle of cleaning product, or do you need to use 3? Are you able to get it done with 2 sets of hands, or do you need 6 sets of hands? Those are data points that will help you to identify ways that you can be more efficient, so that you spend less in order to deliver the same amount of output. And when that happens, that means your profits go up. So we are all interested in being able to take the information that our businesses produce, look at them very carefully and critically in order to see what they're telling us, because they can be telling you lots of different things. And then we get to make some decisions based on what it's telling us, we get to make decisions on how to proceed. I think it's really interesting to look at what employers did in 2020 where working from home was concerned. I know I referred to that previously, but it's also a really good data point because I had many businesses who were convinced that they could not allow their employees to have any sort of telecommuting opportunity available to them because they were convinced that they would not get as much work product out of them if they weren't in an office setting with other workers doing their work. And what COVID has taught us is that where there's a will, there's a way. And a lot of business owners have had their minds changed because their workers have really been able to produce. And how do you think they're finding out about that production? They're looking at the data. They're looking at the number of customers served or the number of products sold or the number of widgets created. Whatever it is that they're in business to do, they are measuring those outputs and they're comparing them to pre-COVID outputs, during COVID outputs, and hopefully we'll get to that post-COVID output. But they're comparing them and they're saying, hey, it really didn't make the amount of difference that I always thought that it would. It actually worked out for them to be working from home. And so that means I need to look at working from home differently. And your employees will let you know when that's necessary. And the way that you are able to assess the efficacy of that program is to look at the data. So I encourage you all to figure out what data is important in your businesses. And then once you've figured out what's important, what kinds of messages are the data that you're collecting giving you? What questions do you have, everyone? Or comments? Such a quiet group. All right, well, I will move on to the next topic. And again, I encourage you, if you do have something come up, you can unmute and you can say it out loud. You can also use the chat because I'm monitoring that as well. This is a subject I really like talking about because every generation gets this title, and we are finally at that generation called Z. And Generation Z refers to workers who were born in 1996 or later. They're the people that are coming out of college right now and getting jobs. And primarily, they're the ones that you're going to be seeing looking for work when you are hiring. And this is a good thing because this generation has some things that they are very good at. Like, for example, they are not uncomfortable with technology. Not like people from my generation who may want to set aside technology or anything that requires them to interface with the computer, instead use their hand or manual transactions. These workers are so familiar with technology because they have simply grown up with it and their comfort level is high and their capacity to use it creatively and productively and whatever they're doing is really excellent. But don't think for 1 second that just because they're good at a particular thing that there's not something that they want. When they are polled, and usually they're being polled, to be honest, when they've left employment because they found it to be dissatisfying, they have said that there are 5 things that they are looking for in their employment situation. And the first thing is leadership skills. Who can tell me and give me an example of leadership? Please unmute and say it or put it in the chat. Really quick, what's an example of leadership? How about managing a project? Being the point person for something that your boss delegates to you and you and the rest of the team have to deliver. Gen Z wants those opportunities and they want them for a pretty practical reason. We in our society can sometimes discount the talents of people who are younger simply because they're youthful. And I'm not going to say whether that's good or bad. I'm going to say it's not wise to take that attitude if it causes you to avoid hiring these people because they have so many other talents. But remember, I talked about their tech exposure. They also want to constantly be refining those skills. So your Gen Z workers and younger employees are going to want you to be on top of technology trends because their reality is that those technology changes make things better and easier and more efficient. And that's what they want. They don't want to waste their time. And let me tell you, you don't want them to waste their time either because their wasted time is your wasted dollar, and you don't want that at all. Make sure that you're giving this group of people opportunity to get together. They're very social beings. Again, they're not like other generations like the millennials who are really willing to put their heads down and work in a cubicle and not look at either side of them. They want to have chances to work with other people. They want to be able to partner in seeking outcomes and goals. They want targets that they can work towards, and they want to be able to achieve those collaboration skills that can only be acquired when you're working collectively on a common goal. Give them those opportunities, and you should be scrutinizing your business for ways that you can do that, because in every business there's an opportunity to build leadership skills and technical skills and collaboration skills and linguistic skills and project management skills. Every business gives that opportunity. On the topic of linguistic skills, I found that to be very interesting when I did research for this presentation, because a lot of Generation Z workers recognize that their competitors outside of the United States are multilingual. They are learning another language throughout their primary education and their secondary education because it's required in other countries, whereas in the US, it's not required. It is encouraged, but it's not required. So they are sometimes looking for those opportunities where they can expand their linguistic ability. What that says to me is that if they're looking for the chance to be multilingual and you have a market potential that could be enhanced by having other languages offered in your business, that looks to me like a good match. You can help them do something that's going to benefit them, and it's going to benefit you. This is also another opportunity for you to increase diversity in your businesses, because when you've got linguistic diversity, then you have people who are able to learn from their coworkers and colleagues about language trends and, little conversation opportunities that they might be able to build on in the future because they've created a foundation of exposure. Look at your business to determine whether you have that capacity. I talked with an entrepreneur a couple of weeks ago who is a native Russian speaker, and they have this ability and this interest to share their language in the context of someone who's curious. Young Gen Z workers are perfect for that. So that's an opportunity for there to be a reciprocal exchange where it's not just about what do you get out of it as the employer, but also what your employee can get out of it. Now, this final topic of project management skills, I think it should be that we all want this, but project management is a very specific way of dealing with a target or an outcome or a goal that you're working towards, where you are really breaking it down into the small components that are necessary to get to that goal. And the idea behind project management is that you need to have a global view of whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, but you also need to be able to have the microcosmic view. You need to figure out what are the deliverables that have to be achieved in order for us to take the steps that are necessary to get to the outcome. Gen Z wants this because they haven't had lots of practice at doing that. When we were growing up in the traditional generation and the boomer generation, we had the opportunity to do this in school because there was a lot of project-based learning that we did. That is not so much the case now because technology has removed that need for you to actually sit and work with people because people are all over. There's a little bit of partnership that's necessary, but it's much more of an independent pursuit in our educational system right now. And so they really come out with a little bit of a social deficit. That plus the fact that all of their communicating is happening through a technology vehicle means that they really need to have some targeted opportunities to learn how to do things. Now, what this says to me is that you might have to be creative in how you do it. I have a client that I work with who makes sauce. And so I would say that client might have a project that they need to do. Maybe they've got to design a page of their website, or maybe they've got to do a survey of a select group of customers so that they can figure out some answers to certain data questions. That's an opportunity for you to get your young worker engaged in a way that builds skills, that are going to be useful for the particular project, but also will create a foundation upon which they can build for the future. And I would encourage all of you, as I've said before, to be looking at your businesses to see where could someone fit who has X need or X skill, because you can always figure out for your business if you need something or you don't. You should never be afraid to say, it's good that that person knows how to do that, but I don't particularly need that. It's more important, though, to know exactly what it is that you do need. When you're working with younger employees, they want engagement with their supervisors and they want a lot of direction, but they then want the opportunity to be able to take the time, the energy, and the effort to do something and then wait for the feedback. They don't want you to monitor their every action. They don't want you to be hovering over them, trying to take care of them. They want to have all of the parameters so that they can check as they're going along that they're meeting the targets. But they want to make sure that they've got the space to be able to do it. Just remember that the younger the worker that you are working with and that you are looking to have be a part of your business, the more you've got to be concerned about the skills that you can provide to them. Because for them, there needs to be reciprocity. In addition to giving you what you are hiring them to do, they want to be able to take something from you. Any questions or comments? Well, you may not have questions or comments, but that pause was good enough for me to take a nice drink so that I can finish the remainder of this presentation. On to our next subject. Gamification. Who knows what gamification means? Type it in the chat, unmute yourself and shout it out. Anybody? And it's okay to guess. Gamification is pretty much what it sounds like, turning some activity or some outcome into a competitive pursuit. And let me tell you, it used to be that people thought, oh, that's the domain of young people. But I'll tell you that the stats are showing that even people that are late career workers or mid-career workers have found themselves benefited from gamification. And there are three primary areas where you'll see it. The first is engagement. And engagement means that your workers are locked in and keyed into what is important to you as an employer and for your company. The other is recognition. And then the third is culture. And I'll talk about each of them for a little bit. This idea of engagement is really important because when you bring on a worker, you know how much energy and effort you have to exert just to be able to bring someone on board to your organization. You've got to post ads. You've got to filter through many, many applications. You've got to identify your top choices. You've got to interview them. You've got to get other people to interview them so that you can all have perspectives that you're able to look at and share and consider collectively. You then got to check their references when you get your top candidates. You've got to make sure that you're confident that they're going to be the right fit for your organization and you're going to be the right fit for them as a worker. And it's then at that point you make that offer to them. And then you spend the rest of your employer relationship making sure that you continue to be the employer that they said yes to, the same way that you want to make sure that they continue to be the worker that you said yes to. So this idea of engagement is really important. And the reason that engagement is such a large part of gamification is that when you create targets for people to achieve together and you give them parameters so that they can aim for something and then reward them as they take those incremental steps towards that target, you are creating stickiness. And when employees are sticky, they are not going to spend their off time looking for other employment. In fact, when they are really content with the culture of their organization and they feel like they're being challenged, which is exactly what gamification is about, they'll actually invite others to be a part of it. Now, it's really important to recognize that they can be sticky, but they're not going to stay that way if you don't make an effort to applaud them when they do things well. Now, I know sometimes with targets and objectives that we have, we don't quite make it. And so sometimes we can discount the progress that we do make just because we didn't hit whatever it was that we were aiming for. But I'm here to tell you a different way to look at that is reward the progression that does occur. Even if it's not all the way to the outcome that you were working towards, applaud the fact that they went along that journey to get to the point that they did achieve. That recognition is really, really important, particularly when you consider how competitive human beings can be. Gamification is a great way to really incentivize your workers, but you have no incentive if there's no recognition. And recognition can come in a lot of different ways. It could be that you're just applauding people. Good job, way to go. Or sending out a company email that says, I want to give kudos to so-and-so for such and such. Or maybe you say to them, hey, it's Friday afternoon and you did such a good job on that project. I'm going to let you clock out 2 hours early on us. Whatever it is that you do, you've got to find a way to help them to see that they've achieved something by giving them something. And that something is different depending on every business, but you want to be certain that you're looking for that something, because there's nothing worse than being in a situation that you create a challenge and your workers strive and make every effort to get to the outcomes that you're seeking, and then they achieve it and you're like, nice job, and that's it. You want to make sure that there's a little bit more to it than that. And recognition is important. And it's also another opportunity for you to allow your employees to have input in the organization's practices and the culture and the way that that's all expressed. And that really creates a nice little segue to this idea of company culture. The reason that it's so important and actually pivotal for gamification is that not every environment is suited to turn something into a competitive pursuit. You know, you wouldn't want to say to someone, oh, in the lab that takes blood draws in order to check people's levels, we want to see who can go the fastest and who can do the most blood draws. Because then you might have people who, because they're trying to go fast and to do many, don't do it as well. Not every environment is suited for it, but you've got to know about your organizational culture. Remember, I talked about when we were discussing hybrid workplaces that not every organization is right for it, but the way for you to find out is really to pull yourself as a business owner and the people that are involved in making decisions for your company, but also ask your workers. And one of the byproducts of gamification is that people feel very bonded to one another. And that bond in the context of a company is what culture refers to. It's that unspoken thing that holds people together so that they are able to work through challenging circumstances in order to achieve an outcome. It's the reason that some people were able to make the COVID-related hybrid and virtual pivots and others were not, because their cultures were strong and they could withstand the challenges of being in that situation, or their cultures were weak and they were not able to withstand it. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at your business, figure out what can you do to create challenge and opportunities for your workers, and maybe even for yourself. I mean, it could be about you making sure that you create an environment that people want to work in, or that you give people challenging projects that can stretch them, or that you have a mechanism so that you share feedback from customers when your workers have done something well. You can apply gamification to the employees, you can apply it to the leaders in an organization, you can apply it to the whole company. It's completely up to you. And the thing that's awesome about it is that you get to decide what works for you. No one else can be your expert. You as a business owner know your business in a way that no other party can, but your workers are really in your business with you. And if you don't have workers yet, they will be, and you want to be thinking about asking them that question when they are a part of your organization, because that again creates an engagement opportunity and gives you a chance to recognize them for the successes that they have. And that combination creates a culture that is appealing, and it makes it easier for you to bring someone into the fold when you've got new opportunities available in your business. Any comments or questions? Can you raise your hand if you'd heard of gamification before today? Wow. Well, that's exciting. Hopefully that means that I've exposed you to something that you might not have gotten any other way. So let's move on to our final topic. And this is a really big topic. So I essentially saved the best for last. And I'm really going to be talking about automation, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality. And the reason I'm talking about it is that they're all technology assists that can impact your business. One thing that most companies will encounter as they're growing is how do they repeat processes in the most efficient way? And sometimes machinery is involved. You know, that's what automation is about. Sometimes it might be that you create a process or a flow that has to be replicated by anyone working on a task in your business, and you monitor that they are actually following the process or the flow to make sure that you have consistent outcomes. But you want to be thinking as a business owner, is there something that I do that I can automate, meaning that I can introduce technology in a way to replicate that process so that I don't have to have a human being doing it, or I can reduce the number of human beings that are doing it? And if there is that opportunity, what would it take to implement that change? You really want to scrutinize your business for automation possibilities. And it's a tough thing to look at because most of us in small businesses don't have the amount of output that makes an automation investment practical. You know, it might be that it's a good idea, but it costs more than it might create for you as far as revenue is concerned. But think about it now, because as your business expands and grows, those opportunities for automation will increase. And you need to be ready to act on them when they present themselves and make a decision about whether you're going to institute some new practices that involve machinery or machine assists, or whether it's something that you're going to table for another time. Now, the second topic is artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is really something that can be instituted in any business that has lots of processes, because what AI does is it tries to learn from what you're doing so that it can predict what needs to happen in a future activity or a future iteration of an activity. So if we go back to our cookie maker who is producing cookies, if they've identified, because they've talked to their customers, that their customers like to see at least 10 chocolate chips in each of their cookies, they have the ability to build in programming that really sorts out their ingredients as they're making it and mixing it to ensure that each of those cookies is going to have 10 chocolate chips. Being able to have technology used so that it learns what's important to you and your business, and then it's able to enhance that through its artificial intelligence, is not something that everyone can take advantage of, but it is the future. And I shouldn't even say this, it's the future, because it's here now. We see examples of it. And it's the kind of thing that you'll encounter when you're working with some apps that you interface with. I mean, I think about that when I look at QuickBooks on a daily basis. QuickBooks is a great example of artificial intelligence living out in real time, in real life right now, because it will look at what it is that you do with the transactions associated with your business, and it tries to guess what it should do with that information and how it should present it to you. And that guessing, the better that it gets at that guessing, the less work that you have to do, because it's now taking on some of that work that would have required you to make an assessment, because now it understands what you're trying to do, and it's taking steps based on what you're trying to do and what you've told it you're trying to do in the future, so that you don't have to take those steps yourself. It's tough to look at artificial intelligence and say, oh, I can apply it to my little consultancy that I just started yesterday. Maybe you can't apply it to your consultancy that you started yesterday, but 5 years from now, there's a possibility that there might be some way that you can utilize that kind of technology to your advantage in your business, but you'll never know if you don't ask yourself the question. So it's important to keep in the back of your mind that this is something that is happening and that could potentially be beneficial to my business. Now, the third concept involved in this sort of technology trend that I'm seeing in operations is virtual reality. And this is just simply fun. So if we look at our little example that we've been talking about since the beginning of this cookie producer, there's sometimes that you might have customers that want to know something about your operations and how it is that you do things. And wouldn't it be neat if you're out at the market and someone is able to interact with a virtual reality program where they're mixing the batter and the eggs and the sugar and the flour and the chocolate chips, that they have the chance to interact with that through virtual reality. It creates a fun experience around your product line, and sometimes it can also be informative. I work with a business that actually plans pile driving. Pile driving is when you have a really huge piece of equipment that drills down into usually a body of water or some major substrate so that they can actually create the pinions that will hold up a bridge or a road or some other large structure. And this business's purpose is to use virtual reality to show the pile drivers what they're going to encounter so that they can practice beforehand. It's kind of like what the space program does when they put people into a zero gravity situation so that they can see what it will feel like once they're in space. Excuse me. This client uses virtual reality so that pile drivers will have an opportunity to interact with situations that they may not be as familiar with. Maybe they're working in a location that they've not worked in before, or maybe there's been some sort of earth movement, like there's been an earthquake, or maybe there's been a hurricane that's readjusted things. And so they need to see what they're getting into before they're actually doing it. Virtual reality is a good tool for that. And that's a very specific example that I'm giving you, but really what you want to be doing is looking at your business and saying, is there any way that virtual reality will benefit me? Because I can think back to the example of the massage therapist that I talked about earlier, who was asking their customers about their need for meditation instruction and opportunities to sort of use the tool of meditation to their advantage. And I think having a virtual reality program might not be a bad idea, because sometimes you can have that virtual reality program walking you through a meditational practice that you might not have any other way. You can listen to it, but it's not the same as being able to see it and sort of interact with it, because you've got the special glasses and you've got the programming that's been created so that it engages you physically in the pursuit of what it is that you're doing. I say all of this to say that as business owners, I know that you have a ton on your mind, and I don't want you to spend a ton of time thinking about something that's not important. But the things that we've talked about today, these 5 areas, are really, really current and trendy and potentially beneficial for your business, and not just today beneficial, but beneficial in the future. So I would encourage you all to be thinking about, how hybrid can my workplace be? Can my workplace be hybrid? Do I feel like I'm the kind of person that would work well with hybrid workers? Because if you don't think that that's who you are, then maybe hybrid is not an option that you should offer. But you got to make sure before you take it off the table that you've considered every aspect of it, because we know workers are looking for it. And then on that topic of workers that are looking for things, think about the generation from which your workers come from. Every generation has some trends and some things that you need to be mindful of, because we've been able to extract commonalities. And the benefit for you is that if you know about the generation that is applying for the type of work that you have available, you can make an assessment about whether or not it's right for you and for that worker, whether you can be the right kind of employer for the worker that's applying. But you won't know that if you're not asking yourself the question about, what is the right type of worker for my environment? Is it possible that I'm not hitting the mark because I don't know what the mark is? Because, that's, it's not something that we all want to be in. situationally, but it is certainly possible. And the advantage for you is that you're looking at what the possibilities are as a business owner, because that's the wise thing to do. And the same can be said about how you use data. Don't let yourself believe, not for 1 second, that data is not important to you. Because you know what? If you think that, your business is in big, big trouble. Because every business has data outputs, whether you recognize it or not. So you want to make sure that if you've got data points, you're using them to your advantage. Because if you're not using them, you're basically wasting an asset, a resource associated with your business. And anytime that you're wasting a resource in your business, you're reducing your potential for profit. And we don't ever want to do that if we can avoid it. And then on this subject of gamification, look for ways that you can incorporate competition and the ability to engage your worker and to provide chances for them to be recognized and to really build a sense of synergy and culture that brings people together to achieve the goals of your organization. Because when you can do that, you're using this relatively new concept to the advantage of your business, and it really is creating a strength that makes it possible for you to face challenges in the future much more effectively, because you've got a team that's already figured out how to work competitively with one another in order to achieve your goals and your outcomes. And at the very sort of outside of your business considerations, you should be looking at automation. If there's a way for you to turn something in that's a repetitive process into something that's automated, assess the cost for doing that so that you can weigh cost-benefit analysis, but check out whether it will fit for your business. The same for artificial intelligence. Do you have the capacity in the processes that exist for your business right now to benefit from technology that exists that learns from your processes and starts to anticipate, and in the effort of anticipating for your processes makes things more efficient? And then finally, on this topic of technology, can virtual reality be something that's incorporated in your business in a way that's interesting for you and for your workers and for potential customers, and as far as your outcomes are concerned for your business, for productivity and profitability purposes? So I feel like I've said a ton, but if you don't remember anything about this talk, what I want you to remember is this: if you're not ready, get ready and figure out which of those areas you need to get ready in. You know, are you talking about hybrid workplace? Are you talking about the data associated with your business? Are you talking about being prepared for younger workers? Are you talking about gamification? Are you looking at how you insert technology like automation and artificial intelligence and virtual reality? Or it could be all of those. But just figure out for yourself by asking the question, because asking the question prepares you for that future answer. And the truth is, we don't want to be in a situation where a problem pops up that we've never considered, because then sometimes when we respond to that problem, we don't make the best choices because we're acting on impulse, not out of preparation. And while we want to be able to react to situations that erupt in our business, it's even better to be able to proact on those situations because you've considered them before and you're ready for them when they happen. I appreciate the attention you've given me so far, and this is your opportunity to ask me questions about these topics or anything. We've got about 9 minutes left. And I'd love to see your faces if you're inclined to do that. I so understand, though, if you want to keep the camera off. I definitely have many, many days, no camera days. I am not always Zoom ready. Hi there.
Hi. Oh, no, I was going to say that I think it was a great presentation, hit on a lot of topics. I think there's a lot to think about and consider even before I can start asking questions. You know, for me, definitely data driven. That's important. And I like the hybrid working situation, not only for myself, but for the employees, but also cost savings too, if you think about it, for your business.
And for contractors that might be partnering with your business,
Yes.
because you don't always have to have them on site because there's higher cost associated with something when it's on site.
Exactly. So,
well, that's a good observation. I appreciate your sharing that, Gail. And I appreciate hearing from you because I know that you've got lots of experience in this area. And I know that your business could benefit from at least 3 of these immediately off the top of my head. But it's so important that you've identified one thing, because I think that what can be challenging for entrepreneurs often is that so many things apply, you want to do everything at once, and then you don't do anything effectively. And
exactly.
we want to ask questions, but it's not always going to be that the answer that you get is that you've got to do it now. Sometimes the answer is not today, but someday.
Yeah.
Alexis, I saw that you unmuted and you opened up your camera. Was there something you wanted to share? Or maybe it was Ricardo that I saw. Someone showed their face, and I love that. Oh man, I feel terrible because I built in time for questions because I didn't want to talk you to death, and now I feel like I talked you to death.
I don't know, just speaking for me, I can't speak for everyone else, but I think, like I said, it's a lot of data
A lot of info.
consider.
Yeah.
And if you're a processor, which I am, it's just going through which one of those do I want to gather. And a lot of it was new data, you know, so it's just the processing it all. Yeah.
Yeah, and we recognize that at Ventures. That's the reason that we record these presentations, so that you'll have access to it in the future, so that when you do encounter a situation, you think, oh, I think that lady during micro business week talked about that, you'll actually be